I know that you know that I dearly love my children. My children who are no longer children, but now young adults who will turn 22 in June. I'm not sure how that's possible. I love them deeply and profoundly. So please remember this as the background to everything I say next. When my children were little, I found being a parent, for lack of a nicer word, relentless. Even as I felt the years slipping by and I mourned the passing of the baby years and then the toddler and then the preschool, I was and still am, in fact, challenged by the demands of being a mother to two very bright and very complicated human beings. I was surprised, and not in a good way, at how impatient I could be. And I know some of you probably don't believe this and think that I was all serenity and light with my children all of the time. And I wish that were true, but it simply isn't. I remember a day when my kids were 5 and in kindergarten, and they would not get dressed for school, even though I had invited them, suggested to them, declared to them, ordered them, and threatened them. And I found myself yelling the words I don't want to yell. And even in the moment that I was yelling, I was thinking how idiotic it was to be yelling that I didn't want to yell, and fully aware that I was saying exactly the kinds of things I swore I would never say once I was a parent. And one of the really difficult things for me as a parent of young children was when I was out somewhere with them and some kind, friendly, well-meaning person said something nostalgic about the wonder of having young children. Words such as, "I hope you are enjoying every single minute." Or even worse than that, when another parent of young children said something similar. "Oh, I have kids the same age as yours. Don't you just love every single second?" Actually, no. I absolutely love my children. But the truth is, there were moments with my children which I definitely did not love and I did not enjoy. The tantrum moments, for example, the fighting like cats with each other moments, the throwing up moments, the yelling moments. I am way more comfortable with the truth of my experience now than I was then. And over the years, I've learned that telling the truth invited other parents to tell their truths too. And at least for those of us who are having a harder time raising harder children, no less beloved and no less precious or worthy, but harder, it became so much less lonely. And why I bring it up this weekend when the larger culture is inviting us to turn our attention to love is that in my experience, love doesn't have so much to do with enjoying every moment. In my experience, love has more to do with commitment, with courage, with tenacity, with vulnerability. Love to me is ultimately about saying yes. Yes, I will open my heart to this person, to this experience, to this child. Yes, I will give myself. I will give of myself, whether I feel like it or not in any given moment. And inevitably, yes, I will be shaped and changed by the giving. Carter Hayward is an Episcopal priest and theologian who wrote a lot about the theology of love. And love, according to Carter Hayward, is something we enact, not something we always feel. Love is the way we embody our commitments, the way we make them real in the world. So love is difficult by its very nature, she says, and actually takes some learning and some practice and some effort. And this is also what makes love life-giving and life-transforming. Carter Hayward writes, love is not a sweet feeling. It is not a matter of sentiment or attachment. Love, like truth and beauty, is concrete. Love is active, effective, a matter of making reciprocal and mutually beneficial relationships. Love creates righteousness or justice here on earth. And loving involves commitment. We are not automatic lovers of self or others or the world or God, and love does not just happen. It is a choice. It is not simply or necessarily a rational choice, but rather a willingness to be present with others without pretense or guile. She says love is a conversion to humanity. A conversion to humanity, a willingness to participate with others, a choice to experience life as a member of the human family. Carter Hayward was one of my professors in divinity school. And when I first heard her speak about love this way, love as work and choice, and love is about creating justice, I distinctly remember thinking that sentiment and attachment sounded a lot easier. And no doubt they are easier. But love transforms us in a way those things never can. Maybe that's why it's at the center of faith. There is a story about a first century Jewish scholar, Rabbi Hillel, that when someone asked him to sum up the whole of the Torah, all the teachings of Judaism in one sentence, he supposedly answered, the answer is love. Do not do unto your neighbor what is hateful to you. Love. All the rest is commentary. Jesus said pretty much the same thing. The Gospel of Matthew tells a story about the Pharisees, Jewish religious leaders, asking Jesus all of these religious questions in order to test his knowledge, but they're also trying to trip him up. And one of the Pharisees asks Jesus, which is the greatest commandment in all the law? And Jesus responds, you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But what does it mean to love with all of our heart and our soul and our mind? What does it mean to love ourselves so that we can actually love our neighbors as ourselves? How does it all translate? To me, the best stories are the most common ones, the stories of people who are practicing love through their daily choices. I think of a woman I knew who lived with her disabled elderly mother who has since died and took such excellent care of her. How it felt so relentless sometimes, and she learned how to call in as much help as she could find and afford so she could go for long walks and take herself to museums. I think of a family I know who has adopted two groups of siblings out of foster care so that the children can stay together, and how impossibly hard and yet full of grace that family's life is. I think of another family I know where all three young children have a serious immune disorder and need weekly transfusions, and how their parents struggle to orchestrate an ordinary, messy, loving life despite serious illness. I think of so many of you who have cared for or are caring for spouses and parents and friends as they die, keeping them company, tending their bodies, doing what needs to be done, even though it is unthinkably hard and even though you are worried and tired. I think the people I know, so many of you among them, who tend to this world in 1,000 different ways, who plant gardens and take care of forests and repair and rebuild things that are broken, though the brokenness never seems to end, who collect food to feed those who are hungry, though the hunger never seems to end. I think of you who go into the Shirley Medium prison to be friends and mentors to incarcerated men there. Those of you who go to the air shelter to play with children and help teach English and build garden beds and collect winter boots. I think of those of you who will take bags of warm clothing into Boston next month to clothe and feed people who are unhoused. And I think of all of us going through our closets to see what we can find to give. These are all love stories to me. They are love stories of the most common and tender kind. Rebecca Parker was the former president of the UU Seminary, Starr King School, and she wrote about this kind of common, tender love in a beautiful book of essays called Blessing the World, What Can Save Us Now? And I'm rereading it again. She writes about the kind of love that I'm most interested in, a love that insists on seeing the world as whole. And she wrote this book after Hurricane Katrina, and she writes about how several days after the hurricane, big-name politicians toured the devastation and quoted the Bible, saying now it was time for people to love their neighbors as themselves. And Parker said this view of love as a gesture of help when the situation has become horrendously dire is not enough. She wrote, maybe in the end, love will save us all, but it has a lot better chance at the beginning. Loving our neighbors, she says, implicates us in loving the whole network of life. Science has given us photographs of Earth from space, and we can see that we are one blue-green globe wreathed in clouds. Even the rocks, part of that complicated flow of elements that fold down into a molten core and rise again. We dwell in our cities and towns on a living, breathing planet. The interconnectedness of all things calls for wisdom and reverence, and we cannot trample this landscape of life and expect to be safe. We cannot turn from our bonds, our obligations, our responsibilities for and with each other and expect everyone to be okay. We cannot love after the fact and expect love to be able to save us. We have to love from the start, not as an emergency strategy when everything has already gone wrong. We have to love our neighbors as ourselves through systems that pay a living wage for labor, instead of allowing the rich to get richer and the poor to be left behind when the storm comes in. It is not enough to address injustice in the moment. If we can learn to love first, not last, then love may save us. So let us make love the first resort, she says. What would that mean for us? To make love the first resort. What common, daily, but transforming love stories can we choose to live out in the week ahead? Many people believe, and I'm among them, that it is really only through love that we bring the sacred to life. That love is one of the most profound ways we experience holiness. Paul Tillich wrote, in every moment of genuine love, we are dwelling in God, and God is dwelling in us. And as I so often say, church is one of the best places I know to practice. This is because love is the foundation of religious community. Love that moves us to engage in sacramental acts, in sacred acts with and for each other. That means we dedicate our children and we proclaim that each of us has the responsibility to make a better world for them. It means we celebrate our joys and grieve our losses together. And we ask one another to hold that grief and to share that joy. It means that when we die, our names will be remembered and spoken out loud. And none of this is based on personality. None of this happens because we like each other. Now, you may like each other, but that's not the point. In church, we don't get to choose who shows up. We may not be particularly thrilled with who shows up, but again, that is not the point. The point is love. Love as the effort to create the world we dream of right here and right now. Not perfect, never perfect, full of mess, in fact, and always falling short, laced through with mistakes and impatience, but also full of grace, full of trying again, full of choosing over and over not to turn away and not to give up. In some ways, my kids' experience of Valentine's Day in that kindergarten year when they were 5 years old was a lesson in love as action, because they both needed to write out 19 Valentines, one for each of the kids in their kindergarten class. The teacher, who clearly knew what she was about, made this a homework assignment and gave us 2 weeks to complete it, but those 2 weeks felt like longer, let me tell you. I tried to liven things up with stickers and heart stamps, but writing 19 Valentines when you are 5.5 is a Herculean task, and it dragged on as my children came face to face with one of the essential realities of love. You don't always feel like it, but you do it anyway. You do it because the empty brown paper Valentine decorated lunch bags in your kindergarten classroom are waiting to be filled. You do it because the whole elementary school Valentine system depends upon every child writing every other child a Valentine, whether you happen to like that child or not. You do it because love is made real through action. Action which sometimes feels joyful and easy and sometimes feels really, really hard. We make love real, letter by letter, word by word, practice by practice. I think it was good and important for my children to practice the work of love through those Valentines, but it turns out it was more important for me because I have never forgotten it. On the day before Valentine's Day that year, both of my kids found their own ways to meet the challenge. Caleb coped by being extremely creative with the placement of the letters on the page. The letters were all there to spell out Happy Valentine's Day, but the arrangement of those letters into words did not follow the standard left to right progression. So his Valentines ended up looking more like Chinese calligraphy or Hebrew. Asa coped through abbreviation. He decided that writing the phrase Happy Valentine's Day 19 times was a needless cruelty. So he shortened happy to hap and designated the letters VAE as his own personal abbreviation for Valentine's. So his Valentines were written in the strange hip hop slang, Hap Vayday. The next day, they brought home the brown paper lunch bags full of Valentines they had received from all of their classmates. Asa had already ripped open all of them, trolling for candy. But Caleb wanted me to go through his with him one by one. There were a lot of Spider-Man Valentines. There were princesses. There were homemade ones with stickers and sparkly glue, and some of them did have lollipops or tiny boxes of candy hearts stuck to them. But the best part to me, the part I hope that I will never forget as long as I live, was all of that labored, crooked, beautiful kindergarten handwriting. I felt like each shaky letter was a testament to love. All of those chubby hands gripping fat markers, all of those parents and grandparents and babysitters and teachers who had committed ourselves to teach our children about the power and the worth and the work of love. The poet Rumi says the world is in deep trouble from top to bottom, but it can be healed by the balm of love. I hope that he is right. I truly believe that he is.